From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. Thousands of young people marched in Venezuela on Wednesday to celebrate Youth Day and the anniversary of a major battle for independence. Members of the youth wing of the ruling PSUV party, along with other student and social movements, joined the march to the presidential palace. Youth Day in Venezuela celebrated on February 12th as Victory Day to commemorate the Battle of Victoria led by Felix Ribas in 1814.
I call on the youth, you and your leaders, to keep up mobilization permanently, to keep up your work of education and developing awareness, because an aware, critical youth is capable of making its way along all the paths that will face you in the future. The rest of the 21st century belongs to you.
The new illegal sanctions against Venezuela and latest acts of sabotage against public services has the nation on high alert. The country's right-wing U.S. allies undoubtedly have plans to destabilize the Bolivarian Republic.
Last Friday, a new set of unilateral sanctions was imposed by the Trump administration, this time on the Venezuelan airline Conviasa. A day later, there was a bomb attack on the state telephone company, CanTV and MobileNet. And on Monday morning, an act of sabotage was carried out against the Caracas metro. All of these events could be considered as isolated incidents, but they coincided with Juan Guaido's tour through Europe and the United States, where he got more resources and backing for more sanctions against Venezuela.
Every day, plans to sabotage the Caracas metro become more distant. It's a plan of these people who travel internationally to gather and find this group of vandals, saboteurs, and fascists. But we, with our organized people, are going to defeat them.
Sectors of the opposition that have distanced themselves from Juan Guaido's leadership reject the sanctions and denounce it as U.S. interference. They have decided to rely on dialogue through the National Assembly, which is no longer led by Guaido, but another faction of the opposition.
We have opposed Guaido because he has been a great promoter of hate, of disqualification. While Guaido threatened to burn us, to turn us into ashes, we tell Guaido to keep on fighting, but always through the democratic means.
People are tired of the lies, the scams, the schemes, the fights. So we invite him to rejoin the Assembly as deputy for the state of Vargas. We invite him to start exercising his duties and move away from extremism, which makes the whole country suffer.
Many lawmakers are increasingly alarmed by the ever-mounting threats Guaido makes alongside U.S. President Donald Trump.
I don't rule out any kind of possibility, even that they push him for further attacks against Venezuela. The United States agenda is to disturb the democratic life of the country, impede the electoral process by the National Assembly, and I believe that their plan is to see how the process will become murky as a result of their actions.
Even though Venezuela is preparing for parliamentary elections, lawmakers still haven't managed to appoint a new electoral council because of the fragmented opposition and their ongoing differences.
Speaking of the Bolivarian Republic, a group of 250 Venezuelans living in Peru have been repatriated as part of President Nicolas Maduro's return to the homeland plan. The group has been flown back to Venezuela on the state-owned airline Conviasa, defying recent U.S. sanctions on the company. This is the second group repatriated from Peru this year. The return to the homeland plan was launched by President Nicolas Maduro in 2018 to facilitate the return of Venezuelans living abroad after a spike in reports of mistreatment, xenophobia, and labor abuse.
I don't have a job. That's the reason we went back. It's also for evaluating the quality of life. The quality of life for the Venezuelan means much more than being working to it. The Venezuelan is accustomed to education, mainly education, have quality of life, and here not found that quality of life. Regarding flights invites or sanctions, it's sad and regrettable how every day they are closing the country, because they not only sanction people, they sanction that food does not enter, and that is why they have other Venezuelans migrant.
When we arrived, we found the harsh reality of xenophobia. The mistreatment of people at work always felt wrong to me. They didn't pay me as well. It was a forced labor, and the truth is that we are returning because we couldn't bear this anymore. And I recommend people not to come because it's really hard, and it's not easy as they believe.
Shifting gears now, family members of Colombia's false positive victims have staged a protest in front of the main court of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace. The group of protesters demanded that retired Army General Maria Montoya, who appeared at the court, take responsibility for the false positive killings that took place under his command. False positives refers to the about 5,000 civilians who were killed by Colombian soldiers between 1988 and 2014 and later presented as guerrillas to gain military benefits. Montoya, a former commander of the Colombian National Army, gave his testimony regarding the false positive killings at a trial that involved 41 victims and 15 judicial representatives. So far, Montoya has been mentioned in 11 testimonies by lower-ranking military personnel. The Organization of American States is preparing to choose its new Secretary General for the 2020-2025 period. The Permanent Council of the OAS met on Wednesday to receive the candidates Maria Fernanda Espinosa from Ecuador, Hugo de Zela from Peru, and the current Secretary General Luis Almagro. They presented their proposals and initiatives for the organization. The election will be held on March 20th, when the OAS will also choose an Assistant Secretary General. The former president of the UN General Assembly and former foreign minister of Ecuador, Maria Fernanda Espinosa, presented her perspective for the OAS. If elected, she will be the first woman to lead the organization.
We are rich in diversity. We can also be wealthy in unity. We have a decision to make. Either we commit to moving forward to a new, powerful stage in the history of the organization, or we simply maintain the status quo, continuing along the same path, content with frustration and lack of meaningful response to the great challenges we face. The OAS is irreplaceable. However, institutions must change with the times. They must grow and evolve. We now must face the challenge of renewing, revitalizing, and rejuvenating the OAS.
Espinosa also said she will promote real integration in the region, including Caribbean nations. Her candidacy was put forward by Antigua and Barbuda and St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
The countries of the Caribbean have great potential for development and are a hemispheric example of regional economic integration. The particular challenges demand special attention from the OAS. I propose a Trans-Caribbean Blue Economy Initiative, a funding and transfer initiative for low-carbon technologies. I will put into full operation this time the contingency fund for natural disasters. I will use the convening capacity of OAS together with CARICOM to facilitate dialogue and agreements on financial services and other macroeconomic challenges. I will encourage the strengthening of interconnectivity efforts with and among the Caribbean. I will promote a student and cultural exchange initiative for the development of bilingualism among the American and Caribbean peoples. Breaking down the language barrier will guarantee real and lasting integration.
When we come back, protests are raging in some parts of Latin America and Africa, so don't go away.
innovation, science, the technological breakthrough, and its influence in society.
Viajeros del saber, el futuro está aquí.
Atomen. Monday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. A former chief executive of Mexico's state oil company Pemex, accused of corruption, has been arrested in Spain. Emilio Lozoya is accused of accepting $10 million in bribes from Brazilian construction giant Odebrecht. He has been on the run since last May. Serving as Pemex chief from 2012 to 2018, Lozoya was also a top advisor to former President Enrique Peña Nieto and allegedly took bribes to help fund Nieto's presidential campaign bid. He denies all the accusations, but his lawyer says that Lozoya has yet to decide whether to fight extradition from Spain or return voluntarily from Mexico. Brazilian indigenous people have protested against the government's new mining bill that was unveiled by President Jair Bolsonaro last week. They are rejecting the proposed legislation, which seeks to open mining and farming activities in the once protected Amazon rainforests. The Aboriginals, who live in and protect the forests, say commercial activities will destroy the environment.
We are against mining on indigenous land because of deforestation, because it is harmful not only for our indigenous people, but also for the whites. And without the land, there is no way to survive, because the land is our mother.
Moving now to Africa, anti-government protests have resumed in Guinea ahead of a constitutional referendum scheduled for the 1st of March. After a break for a few weeks, protesters have returned to the streets to denounce a proposed constitutional change, which they say the country's President Alpha Conde plans to use to stay in power. However, various parts of the capital, Conakry, have been left deserted, as some people chose to stay indoors, fearing for a police crackdown, which had claimed lives in recent protests.
There are a lot of problems right now in Guinea. Our children are not going to school. We don't know what's going on. The National Front for the Defense of the Constitution, Opposition Party 2, every day it's a mess. Even it's not a mess, it's really still a mess. We are fed up with it.
A new report by the International Monetary Fund says South Africa remains one of the most unequal societies in the world. According to the report, the top 20% of the population controls over 68% of national wealth, while the bottom 40% holds only a paltry 7%. The reports also note that despite strides made by the African National Congress-led government to address the legacy of apartheid, black people continue to be the worst affected by poverty. 93% of the 13 million people living below the poverty line are black. Malawi's Electoral Commission Chief Jane Ansah has defended the institution's conduct in the running of the 2019 elections, which have since been annulled. Last week, Malawi's Constitutional Court declared the May election, which gave President Peter Mutharika a narrow win, null and void, citing irregularities. Now, appearing before a parliament committee, Ansah admitted that correction fluid was applied to results sheets, but dismissed accusations that it meant one candidate was favored than the others.
We called the auditors to ask them why they had allowed this. They told us that everything was all right. The TPEX was used to make corrections.
Citizens are facing a national crisis in Sudan due to an acute shortage of bread, fuel and foreign currency. Children were among the adults who waited in long queues to purchase bread and refill their tanks. This current scarcity has hampered the nation's economic revival, 10 months after the ousting of Omar al-Bashir. Years of conflict in Darfur and other regions and the succession of South Sudan in 2011 left the country's economy in chaos.
We are suffering a lot because of the lack of fuel. Since the early morning, we get up and stand in the queue for bread. Students have even left schools to stand in the queue to get bread, fuel, gas and transportation.
What our country has witnessed, from shortages and the supplies and high prices, is just a scene that reflects the miserable economic situation that has been inherited from the era of destruction.
Back to Latin America, Mexico's Attorney General has proposed new reforms that include the removal of a femicide as a specific kind of crime, causing outrage among feminist organizations.
This pink structure located in the middle of Mexico City is known as the Anti-Monument. It has become a meeting point for feminist groups to protest widespread violence against women.
They don't understand the pain of mothers who have lost their daughters. It's impossible to explain. They just don't understand it.
In their last meeting, they commemorated Fatima's death, which remains unpunished. She was 12 years old when 3 men tortured her, raped her, and killed her in the state of Mexico.
We will keep fighting for our daughters, for our mothers and sisters. We will do everything that's possible to bring this to an end, so there are no more deaths. We want all of us to be alive.
In this country, almost all femicides stand in impunity. According to the Attorney General, criminal law needs to be reformed so the public ministry can validate the crimes when they are motivated by gender.
If the public ministry has a specific capacity to resolve homicides, and if there is a vulnerable group, we need to work within our established parameters. We need to create laws that work within our abilities, not beyond them, because that does not help the victims.
However, feminist groups reject the proposal, considering that their years-long struggle will be discarded.
The reform seeks to diminish the importance of gender-based violence and to ignore the fact that femicides often end in impunity. This happens due to a lack of proper training and weak due process by certain institutions.
In the meantime, mobilizations are constant on the streets, demanding increased safety and an end to gender-based violence, as according to official numbers, femicides increased by 137% over the last 5 years.
Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel received Cardinal Timothy Dolan, Archbishop of New York, on Tuesday afternoon, who was on visit to the country at the invitation of the Cuban head of state and the Cuban Conference of Catholic Bishops. This is Dolan's first visit to Cuba, where he has been warmly welcomed. During his stay, he has met with members of the Conference of Catholic Bishops and visited sites associated with the activity of the Church and others of interest. He has also officiated several masses, including in the minor basilica of Our Lady of Charity of El Cobre in Santiago de Cuba and in the Metropolitan Cathedral of Havana. Trump speaking the truth about his so-called Middle East peace plan, of course. Stay with us as we unpack this and more after the break.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en I.
Dotting the I. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The United States President Donald Trump has finally come clean about his so-called Middle East peace plan, confirming that it prioritizes Israel's political interests. Reading out the details of the plan at the White House, Trump made it clear that the deal was aimed at securing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, further stripping Palestinian ownership of the territory. Trump's proposal has triggered widespread protests since it was announced last month.
Under this vision, Jerusalem will remain Israel's undivided, very important, undivided capital.
The UN Security Council on Wednesday adopted a resolution calling for a lasting ceasefire in war-torn Libya, endorsing a roadmap for ending the conflict in the country and condemning the recent increase in violence. The resolution received 14 votes in favor, with Russia abstaining. It condemns the recent blockade of oil facilities and demands that all countries not intervene in the conflict and uphold a weapons embargo. It also recognizes the key role of African nations in ending the violence, notably the African Union and League of Arab States.
With the adoption of this resolution, the Security Council sent an important signal for peace in Libya, reaffirming the concrete commitments of all participants of the Berlin Conference. It is crucial for Libya that we are able to send this signal of unity.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has threatened to strike Syrian government forces everywhere if his troops are attacked. Speaking in Ankara, Erdogan said Turkey is determined to push the Syrian army out of northwestern Idlib province by the end of February. Tensions flared up between Damascus and Ankara in the last few weeks, with Syria accusing Turkey of supporting anti-government rebels. Erdogan claimed that Damascus is attacking the civilian population of Idlib to force displacement to the borders of Turkey and facilitate the conquest of the region.
I hereby declare that we will strike regime forces everywhere from now on, regardless of the Idlib and Sochi deal. If any tiny bit of harm is dealt to our soldiers at observation posts or elsewhere.
In other news, Pope Francis has rejected a proposal from Amazon bishops that would have allowed married men to become priests and women to become deacons to address regional shortage. Instead, the Pope urged bishops to promote prayer for priestly vocations and to encourage those who want to become missionaries to opt for the Amazon region. In October last year, a synod of 184 bishops met at the Vatican to discuss the future of the church in the Amazon, as it is estimated that at least 85% of villages in the region are unable to celebrate Mass every week due to a lack of priests. The World Health Organization says it's way too early to say when COVID-19 might end, but the organization is already working on 4 vaccines.
There are already 4 vaccine candidates in development, and it's likely that there will be 1 or 2 that will go into human trials in about 3 to 4 months from now. So that itself would be a very rapid progress.
As of this morning, only 8 cases globally, we could not find a plausible explanation for their exposure. At a global level, we have a good view on this virus, certainly in terms of the existing transmission chains. And we have tracked each and every event, each and every transmission across borders.
Now, Chinese officials reported that the death toll from the novel coronavirus has risen to 1,367 in mainland China, while the number of cases in the country jumped to almost 60,000. The sudden spike may be due to a change in diagnostic criteria. Authorities are confronted by so many people with symptoms and shortage of official virus testing kits that they had to resort to include long scans to detect infections. But scientists in other countries fear that this method will make it harder to track the epidemic because patients with flu may develop pneumonia visible on a lung scan that can be confused with coronavirus pneumonia-like symptoms. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has extended its global emergency designation for the Ebola outbreak in the DR Congo. The recent outbreak was first identified in August 2018 and has since killed more than 1,300 people in eastern DRC. Though there has been a sharp decline in cases cases. WHO says for the epidemic to be declared over, there has to be no new cases reported for 42 days, which is the double amount of time for incubation. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thanks for watching.